the package that shouldn't exist. Have you ever been home alone when a storm suddenly knocked out the lights for just a second? Have you ever heard your doorbell ring, only to open the door and find no one there? And if someone left a package on your porch with your name written on it in your late grandfather's handwriting, would you open it? 16-year-old Ethan Carter always believed every mystery had a logical explanation. By the end of that rainy Friday night, he'd be begging for one. Ethan lived with his parents in a quiet neighborhood where almost every family knew each other. His mother, Sarah Carter, worked long shifts as a nurse, while his father, David Carter, spent most evenings repairing cars at a local garage. Even though they were usually busy, dinner was one promise they tried never to break. That evening, however, the weather had other plans. Heavy rain flooded the roads, forcing Sarah to stay at the hospital and David to finish work much later than expected. Before hanging up, David joked, "Don't burn the house down trying to cook." Sarah laughed in the background and added, "And don't spend all night taking apart another broken radio." Ethan rolled his eyes with a smile. "I make no promises." It was an ordinary family conversation, the kind nobody thinks they'll ever miss. After the call ended, Ethan walked into the living room where an old cassette player lay in pieces across the coffee table. Fixing forgotten electronics had always reminded him of Grandpa Henry. Whenever something stopped working, Henry never rushed to replace it. He'd grin, hand Ethan a screwdriver, and say, "Everything leaves clues before it breaks. You just have to notice them." The memory made Ethan smile. It also reminded him of the one thing about his grandfather that never made sense. Henry had always hated cordless telephones. Whenever he saw one, he'd quietly leave the room. If anyone asked why, he'd simply answer, "Some calls aren't meant to be answered." Nobody in the family ever understood what he meant. A sudden flash of lightning lit the entire house, followed almost immediately by a loud crack of thunder that rattled the windows. The lights flickered once, then steadied again. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Ethan looked toward the front door. Almost 9 o'clock. No one visited this neighborhood during storms. He waited, expecting another ring. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of him. He crossed the hallway, looked through the peephole, and frowned. The porch was empty. Rain poured from the roof in heavy sheets. The wind pushed tree branches back and forth across the yard. Not a single person was anywhere outside. Just as he was about to walk away, something near the welcome mat caught his eye. A small cardboard package. He opened the door carefully. Cold rain splashed against his shoes. The package was perfectly dry. Not slightly damp. Not protected beneath the porch roof. Perfectly dry, sitting in the middle of a rain-soaked doorstep. A strange feeling settled in Ethan's stomach as he picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. He searched for a shipping label. There wasn't one. No company name. No postage. No return address. Only 6 handwritten words across the top. For Ethan Carter. Open alone. His heartbeat slowed. He knew that handwriting. He hadn't seen it in 3 years. It belonged to Grandpa Henry. Ethan immediately shook his head. No. He whispered the word without realizing it. Henry had died 3 years ago. Someone had copied his handwriting. That had to be the explanation. Locking the front door behind him, Ethan carried the package into the kitchen and carefully lifted the lid. Inside rested an old cordless phone. Yellow with age. Scratched along the edges. The kind people stopped using years ago. There was no charging base. No batteries. No wires. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper. Ethan unfolded it. Only one sentence had been written. If it rings, let it finish once. Never twice. He frowned. What kind of joke is this? Almost as if the phone had heard him. The screen suddenly came to life. A faint green glow illuminated the dark kitchen. No battery. No power. No explanation. Then the ringtone echoed through the silent house. Once. Clear. Sharp. Impossible. Ethan stared at it without moving. The ringing stopped. He let out the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Then, the phone began to ring again. Act 2, the first lie. The second ring echoed through the kitchen, louder than the first, as if the phone already knew Ethan had hesitated. He remembered the note. Let it finish once. Never twice. Before the ringtone could end, he snatched up the receiver. The ringing stopped instantly. For a few seconds, all he heard was soft static. Then a calm voice spoke. Good, you still listen better than Henry did. Ethan's grip tightened. Who is this? Instead of answering, the voice asked, Is the kitchen window open? Ethan frowned and instinctively looked toward the window. It was closed. No. Don't open it. Almost at the same moment, 3 sharp knocks came from the glass behind him. Ethan spun around so quickly, he nearly dropped the phone. Someone was standing outside. A woman. Rain poured over her clothes, yet she didn't seem bothered by it. Her face was hidden beneath the hood of a dark raincoat. The voice on the phone remained perfectly calm. Don't let her see you. A chill ran through Ethan's body. Who is she? You'll believe she's someone you love. The woman slowly raised one hand and knocked again. 3 times. Then she spoke. Ethan. His heart skipped a beat. It was his mother. Exactly her voice. Warm. Gentle. Familiar. Ethan, honey, it's freezing. Open the door. He took an unconscious step toward the hallway. The voice on the phone interrupted. Before you open it, ask her what she gave you on your 10th birthday. Ethan frowned. What? If she's your mother. She'll know. The line went silent. No explanation. No warning. Just silence. Ethan walked to the front door, his heart pounding against his ribs. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. What did you give me on my 10th birthday? There was a brief pause. Then she laughed softly. You've picked a strange time for a quiz. Just answer. Another pause. A bicycle. Ethan didn't move. His mother hadn't given him a bicycle. She had spent months secretly saving money to buy him his first telescope, because he'd become obsessed with the stars after Grandpa Henry showed him Saturn through an old observatory telescope. She cried when he opened it. She often joked it had been the best money she'd ever spent. No mother would forget that. The woman knocked harder. Ethan. I said open the door. Something had changed. Her voice still sounded like Sarah Carter. But the warmth had disappeared. It sounded rehearsed now, as though someone had memorized the sound of kindness without understanding what kindness actually felt like. Ethan slowly stepped away from the door. The woman stopped knocking. For several seconds. Nothing happened. Then she smiled. Not angrily. Not sadly. Patiently. As if she had expected him to fail her test instead. She quietly turned around and walked into the darkness beyond the rain. Ethan watched until she disappeared. Only then did he realize something. There were no footprints. The yard had turned into mud from the storm. Yet the ground where she'd been standing was perfectly untouched. His breathing became shallow. The phone, which had remained silent the entire time, suddenly buzzed. A text appeared on its glowing screen. It only knows what you've forgotten to protect. Before Ethan could make sense of the message, another sound drifted through the hallway. Not a knock. Not footsteps. A familiar melody. Someone was softly humming an old lullaby. The exact lullaby his mother had sung to him when he was little. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from upstairs. Ethan slowly looked toward the staircase. Every light on the second floor had gone out. At the top of the stairs, barely visible in the darkness, someone was standing perfectly still, watching him. The figure didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Then lightning illuminated the hallway for less than a second. The figure was gone. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. This isn't real, he whispered. I'm imagining it. He needed proof. Something solid. Something that couldn't lie. He hurried into the living room and picked up a framed family photograph from the bookshelf. His stomach dropped. The picture showed Sarah, David, and the family dog. Ethan wasn't in it. He grabbed another photograph. Then another. His birthday. Christmas morning. A camping trip. Every picture had changed. Everyone else was still there. Only Ethan had disappeared. As panic began to take over, something slipped from between the photo albums and landed at his feet. A sealed envelope. Yellowed with age. On the front, in the same unmistakable handwriting as the package, were 6 chilling words. If the phone found you. I'm too late. Act 3 Henry's Rules. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at the envelope. His own name had vanished from every family photograph. Yet someone had written this letter years ago, as if they already knew this night would happen. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. No explanation. No warning about ghosts. No dramatic farewell. Just 3 handwritten rules. Rule 1, question every memory before you question your eyes. Rule 2, if something already knows the answer, don't ask it. Rule 3, when both sides want your trust, trust neither. Ethan read them again. None of them explained what was happening. But somehow, they felt more useful than any explanation could. A soft vibration came from the cordless phone. The screen lit up. Burn the letter. Ethan frowned. A second message appeared almost immediately. It wants you to read it. For the first time that night, Ethan didn't react. Instead, he asked himself a question. If the phone is trying to help me, why is it afraid of this letter? Without another thought, he folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. The phone screen went black. It didn't argue. It didn't ring. Its silence felt disappointed. Then another sound came from upstairs. A drawer opening. Then another. Then another. As if someone was calmly searching every room in the house. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen and climbed the stairs. Every bedroom door stood open. Every drawer had been pulled out. Nothing looked stolen. Nothing looked broken. It was as if someone had been looking for one very specific thing. His eyes stopped on Grandpa Henry's old bedroom. The room had been left almost untouched after he died. Ethan stepped inside. The air smelled of old books and cedar wood. On the desk sat an antique wooden box. He had seen it dozens of times growing up. Henry never let anyone open it. Tonight, the lid was already open. Inside lay an old cassette recorder and a tape labeled in fading ink. For Ethan. He pressed play. Static filled the room. Then Henry's familiar voice spoke. If you're hearing this, then you've already made one good decision. Ethan froze. Henry chuckled softly. No. I don't know which one. But I know you didn't follow every instruction you were given. The old man paused. Good. Ethan felt a small, unexpected smile. That sounded exactly like his grandfather. Not mysterious. Not frightened. Just proud. Henry continued. If someone tells you they're the only one who can save you, they're asking you to stop thinking. The recorder crackled. That's how it wins. Before Henry could say another word, the cassette player suddenly stopped. Not because the tape ended. Because someone had pressed stop. Ethan looked around the room. He was alone. The recorder hadn't moved. Yet the button was clearly pushed down. A cold voice drifted from the hallway. You always liked his version of the story. It wasn't coming from the phone. It wasn't coming from the recorder. It came from somewhere just beyond the bedroom door. Ethan slowly stepped into the hallway. No one was there. Only silence. Then the voice spoke again. Calm. Patient. You've noticed something by now. Ethan didn't answer. The voice continued. I've never told you to trust me. That was true. Every instruction from the phone had been a warning. Never a demand for belief. And Henry never told you to trust him either. Also true. Only rules. No promises. Ethan's heartbeat slowed. For the first time, he realized both sides had done the same thing. Neither had claimed to be the hero. Both had only tried to shape his choices. So he asked the first question that belonged entirely to him. If neither of you wants my trust, what do you both want? The house became completely silent. No answer came. Not from the phone. Not from the voice. Not from the recorder. That silence was the biggest answer Ethan had received all night. Because whoever or whatever they were, neither of them wanted him asking that question. At that moment, a loud thud echoed from inside Henry's closet. Ethan swung the flashlight toward it. The closet door slowly creaked open by itself. Inside, hanging behind Henry's old coats, was another door. Small. Black. Completely hidden from anyone who wasn't looking for it. On its center, carved neatly into the wood, were 4 simple words. Only enter if you remember. Act 4, the room that remembered. Ethan stood frozen in front of the hidden door. He had been in his grandfather's room hundreds of times. He had cleaned this closet after Henry's funeral. That door had never been there. Yet somehow, it didn't feel new. It felt forgotten. He reached toward the handle, but before his fingers touched it, the cordless phone rang. Once. Only once. This time, Ethan didn't answer. He waited. The ringing stopped. A message appeared on the screen. Good. You're learning. Ethan ignored it. Then another message appeared. Don't open the door. For the first time that night, he smiled. Now I know exactly what I'm going to do. He pulled the hidden door open. Beyond it wasn't another room. It was the old Carter family living room from years ago. The faded wallpaper. The grandfather clock that had been thrown away. The worn sofa where Henry used to fall asleep every Sunday afternoon. Everything looked exactly as Ethan remembered it. Except nothing moved. The clock's pendulum hung perfectly still. Steam rose from a cup of coffee that never cooled. Dust floated in the air without ever falling. It wasn't a room. It was a memory. Ethan stepped inside. The hidden door quietly closed behind him. Then he heard laughter. A little boy sat on the floor building a wooden airplane. He looked no older than 6. When he looked up, he smiled as if he'd been expecting Ethan all along. You finally remembered the way back. Ethan's throat tightened. Who are you? The boy looked confused. You used to know. Before Ethan could ask another question, footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan turned. Grandpa Henry stood in the doorway. Not transparent. Not ghostly. Just Henry. The same kind eyes. The same old brown sweater. The same gentle smile Ethan hadn't seen since he was 13. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. Grandpa. Henry smiled sadly. I'm only what's left of a memory, son. I can't stay long. Ethan wanted to ask 100 questions. Instead, only one escaped. Who is that boy? Henry looked toward the child. For the first time, his smile disappeared. I've spent 40 years trying to remember his name. The words hit Ethan harder than any scream could have. Henry continued quietly. He was my first child. He disappeared before your father was born. No one remembered him. Not your grandmother. Not the hospital. Not even me. Henry's voice cracked. Until this room gave me my memories back. Ethan looked at the little boy again. He wasn't a ghost. He was a person the world had forgotten. The child looked up at Ethan and whispered, I don't want to disappear again. Before Ethan could respond, the walls trembled. The room darkened. The grandfather clock began ticking for the first time. 1, 2, 3. Each tick echoed like a heartbeat. Then the calm voice returned. Not through the phone. Not from the hallway. From everywhere. You finally found what he stole from me. Ethan slowly turned in every direction. There you are, the voice continued. I was beginning to think you choose ignorance. Henry stepped in front of Ethan. You don't belong here. The voice laughed softly. No. I belonged here first. The room shook again. The family photographs hanging on the walls began changing. Faces blurred. Names faded. The little boy slowly became transparent. He looked down at his own hands in fear. It's taking me again. Henry knelt beside him, holding his shoulders. Look at me. The old man's voice remained calm, despite the panic around him. Tell him your favorite memory. The child closed his eyes. My birthday. Henry smiled. Louder. My birthday. Dad made me a wooden airplane. The boy became slightly clearer. Ethan suddenly understood. Memories spoken aloud couldn't be erased so easily. Henry looked at Ethan. That's why I left rules instead of answers. The truth can be forgotten. But habits survive. The voice interrupted. And yet, you still never understood mine. The room fell silent. Then the voice asked one question. Ethan, if remembering causes pain, why are you fighting so hard to keep it? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Henry. Then at the frightened little boy. Then at the wooden airplane in the child's hands. Finally, he looked into the empty darkness beyond the room. Because, he said quietly, people don't stop existing when they're forgotten. They stop existing when everyone gives up trying to remember them. For the first time all night, the house didn't answer. It simply became silent, as if Ethan had said something it had never expected to hear. Then the hidden door slowly swung open on its own. Beyond it, the real house was waiting. And so was Ethan's final choice. Act 5, the last call. Ethan stared at the open doorway. On one side was the quiet memory room, where forgotten people could still exist. On the other was the real house, where the storm had returned and every shadow seemed to be waiting for him. Henry stepped beside him. You can't save this place, he said softly. You can only decide what leaves it. Ethan looked at the little boy one last time. I'll remember you. The boy smiled. For the first time he looked at peace. Ethan stepped back into the hallway. The hidden door closed behind him with a quiet click. The house was completely silent. No rain against the windows. No footsteps upstairs. No whispers. It felt as though the entire house was holding its breath. Then the cordless phone rang. Once. Ethan picked it up before it could ring again. The familiar voice spoke immediately. So, have you decided? Ethan didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked one of his own. Why this family? A long silence followed. Then the voice replied. I didn't choose your family. They chose to remember. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Most people let forgotten things disappear. But Henry refused. He wrote names in journals. He told stories no one believed. He kept photographs everyone else threw away. The voice paused. Every time someone remembers what should have been forgotten. A door opens. Ethan finally understood. The house wasn't hunting random people. It was drawn to those who refused to let memories die. Henry hadn't caused the curse. He had spent his life resisting it. "You've been trying to make me afraid," Ethan said. "No." The voice sounded almost disappointed. "I've been trying to make you stop." "Stop what?" "Remembering." The line went quiet. Ethan slowly smiled. "If remembering is what weakens you, then that's exactly what I'll keep doing." He hung up. The phone immediately went dark. Not because the battery died. Because it had finally fallen silent. Around him, the house began to change. The walls groaned. Cracks spread across the ceiling. The photographs that had erased him slowly returned to normal. In one picture, Ethan stood beside his parents at Christmas. In another, he sat on Grandpa Henry's shoulders during a fishing trip. The memories were coming back. One by one. Not because the house was losing. Because Ethan had stopped letting it decide what deserved to exist. A loud crash echoed from upstairs. The hidden door burst open. The memory room was fading. Henry stood inside, smiling. He raised one hand in a final goodbye. Not a word. He didn't need one. The door dissolved into dust. The room was gone. So was Henry. The storm outside stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Morning sunlight slipped through the windows. Hours had passed. The front door unlocked with a soft click. A familiar voice called from outside. "Ethan." It was his father. This time, real footsteps crossed the porch. Real muddy footprints appeared on the floor as David hurried inside, followed by Sarah, still wearing her hospital jacket. His mother wrapped him in a tight hug. "We've been calling you all night." Ethan hugged her back harder than he ever had before. For a moment, everything felt normal. Until he looked toward the kitchen table. The cardboard package was gone. The cordless phone was gone. Only Henry's handwritten note remained. It now contained one final sentence that hadn't been there before. "You remembered. That's enough." Months later, life moved on. The strange events never returned. The house was sold. Another family moved in. Ethan left for college, but every Sunday he visited Pine Lake. Not because he remembered everything. Because he refused to forget the things he still could. One autumn afternoon, while walking past the old dock, he noticed a young father teaching his little son how to skip stones. The father laughed and said, "Everything leaves clues before it breaks." Ethan stopped walking. Those were Henry's exact words. The man smiled politely, as if he'd invented them himself. He had no idea where they came from. Ethan smiled back. Some memories don't survive because they're written down. They survive because someone lives them again. As Ethan turned to leave, something caught his eye near the edge of the dock. A small cardboard package. Perfectly dry. Even though it had started raining. There was no shipping label. No return address. Only 6 handwritten words. For whoever still chooses to remember. Ethan looked at it for a long moment. Then, he walked away without opening it. The camera lingers on the unopened package. A single ringtone echoes across the empty lake. Then, silence.